me! Let me go!
For generations, Uda village had feared one night more than death itself. Every 4 years, a giant bird came from the forest and took one young person. But this time, the elders knew something terrifying. The bird had already chosen its victim, Fasola. As the creature descended from the sky, an old woman screamed, "Don't let it take him. He must not discover the truth." But it was already too late. The bird seized Fasola and vanished into the darkness. And deep inside the evil forest, Fasola was about to discover why the bird had been taking sacrifices for generations and the terrible betrayal that started it all. Nobody knew exactly when the story of the bird began. Some said it had been coming for more than 100 years. Others said it had been coming for much longer. The oldest people could remember stories told by their grandparents, stories of a gigantic bird appearing in the sky, stories of young people disappearing, stories of families crying until their voices became weak. But nobody had ever seen where the bird came from. Nobody knew where it went after leaving Oda, and nobody knew what lived beneath its enormous wings. The bird did not come every year. It did not come every 2 years. It came only once every 4 years. That was what made it even more frightening. The people always had time to forget. They would begin to believe that perhaps the bird would never return. They would begin to live normally again. Children born during the previous sacrifice would grow older, young men would marry, young women would start families, farmers would build new houses. The village would slowly recover. Then the 4th year would come, and everything would change. Nobody knew the exact hour the bird would arrive, but there were always signs. On the night before its coming, the forest would become strangely quiet. The frogs near the river would stop making sounds. The birds would disappear from the trees. Even the dogs would behave differently. They would stare toward the forest and bark for no clear reason. The elders always watched the sky. They knew what was coming. Then, on the chosen night, the moon would shine brightly. The village would be unusually quiet. People would finish their evening meals early. Doors would be closed, children would be warned not to play outside, and mothers would whisper prayers over their children. Then, suddenly, a shadow would appear across the moon. At first, it would look like a large cloud. Then, the shadow would become bigger and bigger until the moonlight disappeared completely. The giant bird had arrived. It would spread its enormous wings across the sky and circle Oda once, twice, 3 times. Nobody knew why it always circled the village 3 times, but the people had learned what it meant. After the 3rd circle came the cry, "Kra!" The terrible sound would shake the village. Roof coverings would tremble, dogs would run into hiding, children would scream, mothers would pull their children close, men would hold their breath. Nobody dared to open their door. Nobody wanted to look through a window because everyone knew what happened next. The bird would choose someone. Sometimes it was a young man. Sometimes it was a young woman. It did not matter whether the person was rich or poor. It did not matter whether the family was powerful or ordinary. It did not matter whether the person had done anything wrong. The bird simply came and took someone. The person would never return. Nobody was ever found. No footprints were ever discovered. No hunter ever found the missing person in the forest. They simply disappeared, and their families were left with nothing but memories. As the next 4th year approached, fear slowly returned to Oda. People began counting the months, then the weeks, then the days. Mothers became nervous whenever their sons stayed outside too long. Fathers warned their daughters not to walk alone. Young people started asking questions that nobody wanted to answer. Who will the bird take? Will it be someone from my family? What if he chooses me? Those questions spread through the village like dry grass catching fire. Some families even began discussing ways to hide their children. One man built a small room beneath his house. Another family planned to send their daughter to a distant village. Some people went to herbalists, others prayed throughout the night. But everyone knew that hiding had never worked before. The bird always found the person it wanted. One evening, the elders of Oda gathered beneath the great Iroko tree. The sun was slowly disappearing. The sky had turned orange. Birds flew back toward their nests, but nobody paid attention to the beautiful evening. The elders were too worried. Chief Adekule, the oldest chief in the village, sat at the center. His walking staff rested beside him. His face was serious. Around him sat the other chiefs and elders. Many villagers stood nearby, waiting to hear what they would say. Chief Adekule finally lifted his staff. "The 4th year is almost here." The words were simple, but they frightened everyone. A young man standing at the back swallowed hard. "Chief," he asked, "must we continue allowing this?" The chief looked at him. Nobody answered immediately. Another elder lowered his head. "What can we do?" he finally asked. A second elder spoke. "We have tried everything. We offered food to the forest spirits, we called herbalists, we consulted priests, we prayed, we sacrificed animals, we even sent our strongest hunters into the forest." The old chief slowly shook his head. None of them found the answer. An uncomfortable silence filled the village square. Then an elderly woman stepped forward. Her tears were already running down her face. "My first son was taken 8 years ago." Everyone looked at her. "I watched him leave that morning." Her voice broke. "He was 23 years old." She wiped her face. "He never came home." Another woman began crying. "My daughter was taken 4 years later." She covered her mouth. "She was the only child I had." The crowd became silent. Then another voice came from behind them. "So, who will it take this time?" Nobody answered. The question remained hanging in the air. The truth was simple. Nobody knew. And that was the greatest fear. Because the bird did not choose according to wealth. It did not choose according to family. It did not care whether someone was a chief's child or the child of a poor farmer. It simply came, it chose, and it took. Among the young hunters of Oda was a brave man named Fasola. Fasola was known for his courage. He was not the strongest man in the village, but he was intelligent and observant. He had entered the forest many times. He knew the paths. He knew where wild animals drank water. He knew where hunters could safely sleep. But there was one place he had never entered, the deepest part of the evil forest. His father had warned him about it when he was a child. Never follow a strange voice inside that forest. Fasola had always wondered why. Now, with the 4th year approaching, his questions became stronger. One afternoon, he went to the home of an old woman named Iya Morenike. Iya Morenike was believed to be more than 100 years old. She was blind, her hair was completely white, her back was bent from age, but people said there was something unusual about her. She remembered things nobody else remembered. She knew stories that had disappeared from the mouths of other elders, and whenever people talked about the giant bird, she became strangely quiet. Fasola found her sitting beside her hut. She was sorting beans slowly with her hands. "Mother," Fasola greeted. "Fasola," she replied without looking up. "You know my name?" The old woman smiled. "I know the names of many people in this village." Fasola sat beside her. He was silent for a while. Then he asked, "Mother, do you know the truth about the bird?" The old woman's hands stopped moving. For several seconds, she said nothing. Fasola watched her carefully. "You know something," he said. The old woman continued sorting the beans. "Why do you think so?" "Because whenever people mention the bird, you become silent." The old woman sighed. "Some things are better forgotten." "But people are disappearing." "I know." "Every 4 years." "I know." "Then somebody must know why." The old woman slowly raised her head. "You are asking questions that can bring trouble." "I am not afraid." "You should be." Fasola looked toward the forest. "Some people say the bird is the spirit of our ancestors. They are wrong. Others say it is a demon. Wrong again. Then what is it?" The old woman became quiet. Fasola leaned closer. "Mother, tell me." The old woman placed the beans down. Her face suddenly became serious. "The truth about the bird did not begin with the bird." Fasola frowned. "What do you mean?" "It began with a woman." "A woman?" "Yes." "Who was she?" The old woman looked toward the dark forest. "Her name was Adeola." Fasola's heart beat faster. "Who was Adeola?" The old woman opened her mouth to speak, but before she could say another word, a powerful wind suddenly swept through the village. Dust rose from the ground. The leaves of the trees began shaking violently. The small fire beside Yamorenike went out. Fasola stood up. "Mother!" The old woman did not answer. She was staring toward the forest. Then Fasola heard something. A distant sound. It was faint at first, almost like the cry of a bird, but it became louder. Kra! Fasola's eyes widened. Yamorinike grabbed his wrist. "Go home." "Mother, what is happening?" "Go home now." "But you have not told me who Adeola was." The old woman tightened her grip. "You will learn soon enough." Another cry came from the forest. Kra! This time, even the people in the farthest compound heard it. Doors began closing. Dogs started barking. Children cried. The entire village became unrestless. Yamorinike whispered, "The bird has begun to awake." Fasola looked toward the sky. For a moment, he saw nothing. Then, a huge shadow slowly moved across the moon. His blood ran cold. The 4th year had not yet officially arrived, but the bird was already above Oda. And this time, something was different. Because the bird was not circling the village, it was flying directly toward Fasola. Fasola stood frozen beneath the ancient Iroko tree. Above him, the enormous wings spread across the night sky. And somewhere deep inside the evil forest, something that had been sleeping for generations had finally opened its eyes. Many generations before Fasola, before the people of Oda became afraid of the giant bird, there lived a young woman whose name was Adeola. She was not born into a royal family. Her father was a farmer. Her mother was a trader who sold vegetables and farm produce in the village market. Adeola grew up like every other child in Oda. She fetched water. She helped her mother in the kitchen. She worked on her father's farm. She played with other children beneath the ancient Iroko tree. But as Adeola grew older, people began to notice something unusual about her. She was extremely brave. While other girls were afraid to enter the forest alone, Adeola could walk through the forest without fear. While other young people ran when they heard wild animals, Adeola stood her ground. She was strong, she was quick, and most importantly, she had a heart that could not tolerate injustice. When she became a young woman, Adeola began training with the village warriors. Some men laughed when they first saw her holding a spear. "Why are you doing this?" one warrior asked. Adeola looked at him. "Because Oda needs people who can protect it." The man laughed. "You are a woman." Adeola did not argue. She simply continued training, day after day, month after month. She learned how to use a spear. She learned how to use a shield. She learned how to move silently through the forest. She learned how to read footprints on the ground. Soon, the same men who laughed at her began asking her for advice. Adeola became one of the best warriors Oda had ever seen. But she never became proud. Whenever people praised her, she always said, "I am only protecting my home." In those days, Oda was surrounded by other villages. Some were friendly, others were not. There were times when raiders attacked farmers. Sometimes they stole crops. Sometimes they took animals. Sometimes they tried to enter the village at night. Whenever danger came, Adeola was always among the first people to respond. One afternoon, a group of farmers were returning from their farms when they heard shouting. Several raiders had entered the area. The farmers became frightened. One of them ran toward the village. "Help! Help!" Adeola heard the cry. She immediately picked up her spear. "Where are they?" The man pointed toward the forest. "They are coming this way." Adeola looked at the other warriors. "Protect the farmers." "What about you?" one asked. "I will slow them down." She ran toward the forest. The other warriors followed. That day, Adeola stood between the raiders and the farmers. She did not run. She did not hide. She stood firmly. When the raiders saw her, they were surprised. "Who is this woman?" Adeola raised her spear. "You will not enter Oda." The battle began. After a long struggle, the raiders were forced to retreat. When Adeola returned to the village, the people gathered around her. Women sang, children danced, the elders praised her. Her mother looked at her with tears in her eyes. "You are becoming a great warrior." Adeola smiled. "I only did what I had to do." But unknown to Adeola, every victory was making some people inside the palace uncomfortable.
Years passed. Then, one terrible year, Oda faced its greatest danger. A powerful enemy army came from beyond the hills. They were many. They had experienced warriors. They carried weapons. They believed Oda was too small to defend itself. One morning, a messenger ran into the village. "Enemies are coming!" People panicked. Women gathered their children. Farmers hurried home from their farms. The king ordered all warriors to prepare. The palace became busy. Drums sounded throughout the village. Men gathered at the village square. The king stood before them. "We must protect Oda." The warriors shouted, "Yes, we will not allow our village to fall." But everyone could see the fear on their faces. The enemy army was much larger. Then Adeola stepped forward. "Let me lead the warriors." The king looked at her. "You?" Adeola nodded. "Yes, Kabirse." "You know how large the enemy army is?" "Yes." "And you still want to lead?" Adeola looked around at the villagers. She saw mothers holding their children. She saw old people praying. She saw farmers looking at their homes. Then she answered, "I will protect Oda." The king finally nodded. "Then lead them." The battle began before sunrise. The sound of weapons filled the air. The enemy soldiers rushed toward Oda. Adeola stood at the front. "Hold your position." The warriors obeyed. The first attack was powerful. Many warriors were pushed backward, but Adeola refused to retreat. "Stand together," she encouraged them. "Do not run." The enemy attacked again. Adeola fought beside her people. Whenever a warrior fell, she helped him. Whenever someone became frightened, she encouraged him. "Remember your families. Remember Oda. Stand firm." The battle continued for hours. The sun rose high, then slowly began to fall. Still, Adeola fought. By evening, the enemy army had been defeated. The remaining soldiers ran toward the hills. Oda had won. The village erupted with joy. Drums sounded, women danced, men shouted, palm wine was brought out, children ran through the village celebrating. The king stood before everyone. He raised his hand. "My people!" The crowd became quiet. Today, Oda has survived because of the courage of one person. He turned toward Adeola. "This woman has saved our village." The people shouted, "Adeola! Adeola! Adeola!" Adeola smiled. Her mother cried with happiness. But while the village celebrated, some elders stood quietly. They were not celebrating. They were watching Adeola. And behind their smiles was something dangerous: fear.
That night, when the celebration had ended, several elders secretly entered the palace. The doors were closed. The guards were ordered to stay far away. The king sat silently. One elder spoke. "Adeola is becoming too powerful." Another elder nodded. "The people love her." A third elder added, "They listen to her more than they listen to some of us." The king frowned. "She is loyal to Oda." "For now," another elder replied. The king looked at him. "What are you suggesting?" The elder leaned forward. "What happens when the people begin asking her to become their leader?" Nobody answered. Another elder spoke. "She could become queen." The king's face became serious. "She may even take the throne." "But she has never shown interest in the throne," one elder said. The room became quiet. Then the oldest elder slowly said, "Power does not always begin with ambition." The king looked at him. "What do you mean?" "Today, she saved Oda. Tomorrow, the people may believe she is the only person capable of protecting them. And when that happens, what will remain of the king's authority?" The king lowered his head. He knew the elders were afraid, and fear can make people do terrible things. Finally, one elder whispered, "We must stop her before she becomes too powerful." The king looked up. "How?" The elder smiled. "We know her secret." Years earlier, while Adeola was still a young warrior, she had entered the deepest part of the evil forest. She had been chasing a dangerous animal that had attacked farmers. But instead of finding the animal, she found something else. She discovered an ancient place hidden among enormous trees. At the center stood a strange stone. When Adeola touched it, she felt a powerful force move through her body. From that day, her strength became greater, her senses became sharper, her courage became almost impossible to break. But Adeola never told the villagers what she had found. She believed the secret was between her and the spiritual world. Unfortunately, the elders had discovered the secret, and now they planned to use it against her. The next morning, the king sent for Adeola. "Adeola," he said, "come to the palace." She arrived without suspicion. The king smiled. "You have served Oda faithfully." Adeola bowed. "I only did my duty, Kabiesi. You have protected our people. It was my responsibility. You have brought victory to Oda." Adeola smiled. The king continued, "You deserve a special blessing." Adeola became happy. She never imagined that the people she had protected were preparing to betray her. That evening, the elders took her to a sacred place inside the palace. They told her it was a ceremony to honor her. Adeola knelt. The elders began speaking ancient words. She closed her eyes. Then suddenly, she felt something strange. Her body became weak. Her hands began trembling. She tried to stand, but her legs failed her. Adeola fell to her knees. "What is happening?" Nobody answered. She looked at the king. "Why can I not move?" The king looked away. Adeola's eyes widened. "What have you done?" The elders continued their ceremony. Adeola tried to fight. She tried to call for help, but her strength was disappearing. Then she understood. They were attacking the source of her power, the same power she had used to defend Oda, the same power that had helped save their lives. "Adeola," the king said quietly, "forgive us." Adeola stared at him. "Forgive you?" Her voice shook. "I defended your throne." Silence. "I protected your people." Nobody moved. "I stood between Oda and its enemies." Her eyes filled with tears. "And this is how you repay me." The king could not look at her. Adeola looked around the room. She saw the same elders she had fought beside. She saw the same people she had protected. And suddenly, she understood. They had never been afraid of her because she was evil. They were afraid because she was powerful. They feared what she might become. And because of that fear, they decided to destroy her. The elders took the weakened Adeola deep into the forest. The night was dark. The trees moved in the wind. Adeola could barely walk. She looked back toward Oda. The village lights were visible in the distance. That was her home. The place she had fought for. The place she had sacrificed everything for. The king's men left her near the deepest part of the forest. Adeola fell to the ground. "Why?" Her voice echoed through the trees. "Why did you do this to me?" Nobody answered. She looked toward the village one last time. Then she whispered, "I gave you my strength. I gave you my courage. I gave you my life. And you gave me betrayal." The men turned and walked away. Adeola remained alone. She cried through the night. She cried until her voice became weak. But the forest gave her no answer. The next morning, she tried to walk. She wandered deeper into the forest. Days passed. She became hungry. She became tired. Still, she continued. Until one night, she reached a place where even the wild animals refused to enter. There was a giant tree. Its trunk was wider than a house. Its branches reached high into the darkness. The air around it was cold. Adeola stopped. Then she heard a voice. "Adeola." She turned. "Who is there?" The forest became silent. Again, the voice came. "Adeola." She looked toward the giant tree. "Show yourself." A deep voice answered from within the tree. "I know your pain." Adeola stepped closer. "Who are you?" "I know what Oda did to you." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then you know they betrayed me." "Yes." "They took everything from me." "Yes." "What do you want?" The voice became softer. "I can give you strength." She remained silent. "I can give you power." She took another step. "I can give you something no human can take away." "What?" "Immortality." Adeola stared into the darkness. Then the strange being spoke again. "But nothing is free." Adeola's voice was low. "What do you want from me?" The forest became completely silent. Then the voice answered, "A covenant." Adeola did not yet know that the choice she was about to make would change the history of Oda forever. And somewhere far away, the people of Oda were sleeping peacefully, unaware that the woman they had betrayed was about to become the greatest fear their descendants would ever know. After many years of pain and sorrow, the people of Oda village decided to end the terrible sacrifice. With another 4 years approaching, they consulted the oracle. The chief priest revealed the truth. A strange spirit in the evil forest had empowered Adeola for generations. The spirit took the sacrifices and could never look at its own reflection. If it saw itself, it would die, and Adeola would die too. But only Adeola knew where the spirit lived. The question was simple: who would risk his life to find it? Everyone remained silent until Fasola, a brave hunter, stepped forward. "I will go." 7 days later, the chief priest prepared him for the journey. He gave Fasola a mirror and some food, warning him to allow Adeola to take him as the next sacrifice. Once the giant bird carried him to the spirit, he must show the spirit the mirror. On the chosen day, Oda village fell silent. Fasola stood alone in the street. Suddenly, a massive shadow covered him. He looked up. The giant bird had arrived. Before Fasola could react, its powerful claws grabbed him and carried him toward the evil forest.
Fasola could hear the wind roaring around him. The sound was so loud that he could hardly hear his own thoughts. The giant bird carried him higher and higher into the night sky. Below him, Oda village became smaller. The houses looked like tiny dots. The great Iroko tree looked like a small dark mark on the ground. The river that passed beside the village looked like a thin silver line under the moonlight. Fasola looked back one last time. He could see the place where he had been born. He could see the village where his mother was waiting. He could see the homes of the people he had promised to protect. Then the giant bird turned toward the forest. Fasola's heart began beating faster. The village disappeared behind him. Ahead was only darkness. The evil forest stretched endlessly beneath the moon. Tall trees stood like giants. Mist moved between their branches. Fasola closed his eyes. For a moment, fear overwhelmed him. He wondered if he would ever see Oda again. He wondered whether he had made the right decision. He wondered what was waiting for him inside the forest. Then he remembered the words of the chief priest. Courage does not mean you are afraid. Courage means you continue even when fear tells you to turn back. Fasola slowly opened his eyes. He took a deep breath. "I will not turn back," he whispered. The giant bird continued flying. The further they traveled, the stranger the forest became. The trees became taller. The air became colder. The moonlight became weaker. Fasola noticed that there were no birds flying around them. There were no monkeys jumping between the branches. There were no insects making their usual sounds. It was as if every living thing in the forest knew that something powerful was coming. The giant bird suddenly flew between two enormous trees. Fasola felt branches brush against his body. He held tightly to the bird. He did not know where they were going, but he knew the bird was taking him deeper into the evil forest. Then something strange happened. The bird did not attack him. It did not try to hurt him. It simply carried him, almost as if it had been ordered to take him somewhere. After what seemed like many hours, the giant bird suddenly began descending. Fasola looked down. Below him stood an enormous tree. It was larger than any tree he had ever seen. Its trunk was wider than a large house. Its branches disappeared into the darkness above. Strange marks covered its bark. Fasola remembered the words of the oracle. Only Adeola knows where the spirit lives. His heart began beating faster. The giant bird landed. Fasola fell gently onto the ground. The bird stood silently before him. Then something strange happened. Its enormous body began to change. The feathers disappeared. The wings slowly folded into the body. The huge shape became smaller, and before Fasola's eyes stood a woman. She was wearing an old traditional cloth. Her hair was long. Her face looked tired. Her eyes carried many years of pain. Fasola stepped backward. "You,"
The woman stared at him. "You are not like the others." Fasola said nothing. He knew immediately who she was. Adeola.
Adeola walked slowly toward him. Fasola remained still. She studied his face. "You are afraid?" Fasola swallowed. "Yes." Adeola looked surprised. "But you still came." "I made a promise." "To whom?" "To Oda." Adeola laughed softly. "Oda?" She said the name with pain. "For generations, that village has lived because of my suffering." Fasola looked at her. "Do you hate them?" Adeola did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward the distant trees. "I hated them for many years." Then she turned back. "Do you know what it feels like to give everything to people and receive betrayal in return?" Fasola lowered his head. "I know what the oracle told us." Adeola's eyes narrowed. "What did the oracle tell you?" "The truth." "What truth?" "That you were once the greatest warrior in Oda." Adeola became silent. "That the people you protected betrayed you." Her eyes filled with tears. "That they took away your power and abandoned you in this forest." Adeola looked away. "And they finally remembered?" "Yes." "After all these generations?" "Yes." She shook her head. "Humans remember what is convenient." Fasola stepped closer. "They know they were wrong." Adeola stared at him. "And why did they send you?" "To end the sacrifice." Her face became cold. "You want to end my covenant?" "Yes." "You want to take away the only thing that has kept me alive?" "I want to stop people from disappearing." Adeola's voice became angry. "Then you will fail." Suddenly, the enormous tree behind her began to shake. The ground trembled. Leaves fell from the branches. A cold wind swept through the forest. Fasola turned toward the tree. Something was moving inside it. A deep voice came from the darkness. "Who has entered my forest?" Fasola's body became stiff. Adeola stepped backward. The tree shook again. Then the strange spirit emerged. It was not like any human being Fasola had ever seen. Its presence filled the forest with fear. Fasola remembered the oracle's warning. The spirit must never see its reflection. His hand slowly moved toward the bag. His fingers touched the mirror. He had one chance. If he failed, he might never return to Oda. The spirit moved closer. Fasola did not move. Adeola watched him carefully. The spirit came closer. Fasola waited. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. The spirit stopped. "Who are you?" Fasola said nothing. The spirit looked directly at him. Then it moved closer again. Fasola tightened his hand around the mirror. He waited for the right moment. The spirit suddenly raised its hand. Fasola knew he could not wait any longer. He pulled the mirror from the bag. He held it up. The spirit saw its reflection. For a moment, nothing happened. Everything became silent. Even the wind stopped. Then the spirit screamed. A terrible cry filled the forest. Adeola covered her ears. The giant trees shook. The ground trembled. Fasola almost dropped the mirror, but he held it firmly. The spirit began to fade. Its body became like smoke. "No!" Adeola shouted. The spirit struggled to remain, but its power was disappearing. The covenant was breaking. That strange force that had controlled Adeola for generations was finally coming to an end. The spirit screamed one last time. Then it disappeared completely. Silence returned to the forest. Fasola slowly lowered the mirror. He was breathing heavily. He looked toward Adeola.
She was on her knees. The giant bird was gone. The spirit was gone. The covenant was broken. And Adeola's immortality was gone.
For a moment, Fasola expected Adeola to attack him, but she did not. Instead, she looked toward Oda. Her eyes were filled with sadness. I wanted them to remember what they did to me. Fasola lowered the mirror. They will. Adeola looked at him. But remember this, Fasola. What? Hatred can survive longer than a human life. She looked toward the village. But forgiveness can end what hatred started. Fasola remained silent. Adeola continued. I became the thing they feared because I allowed their betrayal to control my heart. She looked down. I protected Oda once. Her voice became weak. And later, I became its greatest enemy. Fasola said gently, You can choose differently now. Adeola looked at him. For the first time in many generations, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was peaceful. Thank you. A gentle wind passed through the forest. Mist slowly surrounded her. Fasola watched as her body became lighter. Then Adeola disappeared into the morning mist. The giant bird was gone. The strange spirit was gone. The covenant was broken. For the first time in generations, the evil forest became quiet. But Fasola still had one problem. He had to find his way home. Fasola began walking. He did not know how many days it would take. He followed a small river. He crossed rocky paths. He climbed hills. At night, he slept beneath trees. Sometimes he had strange sounds in the distance. Sometimes he became afraid, but he continued. He remembered his mother. He remembered Oda. He remembered the promise he had made. He had to return. Meanwhile, Oda had become a village of mourning. Fasola's mother refused to accept that her son was dead. Every morning, she stood near the village entrance. Every evening, she looked toward the forest. He will return, she told herself. I promised me. The elders also began losing hope. Chief Adekunle often sat beneath the Iroko tree without speaking. The chief priest continued praying. Nobody knew what had happened to Fasola. Nobody knew whether he had succeeded. The people could only wait. Then, one morning, something unexpected happened. A young boy was playing near the village entrance. Suddenly, he stopped. He looked toward the dusty road. Then he shouted, "Someone is coming!" Nobody paid attention first. The boy shouted again, "Someone is coming from the forest!" People rushed outside. A figure appeared in the distance. He was walking slowly. His clothes were dirty. His body looked weak. His face was covered with dust, but he was alive. Chief Adekunle stood up. His eyes widened. "Fasola!" The man lifted his head. "It is me." The village exploded with joy. Women cried. Children shouted. The talking drums began to sound. Fasola's mother ran toward him. "My son!" She embraced him tightly. "You came back!" Fasola smiled. "Yes, Mama." She touched his face. "I thought I had lost you. I promised I would return." The chief priest slowly approached. He looked at Fasola for a long time. Then he asked, "Is it finished?" Fasola nodded. "The bird will never come again." The chief priest closed his eyes. A deep breath escaped him. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then he turned toward the elders. "Oda has been given another chance." Chief Adekunle looked confused. "What do you mean?" The priest looked around at the people. "Now we must face the truth." That day, the chief priest told everyone the complete story of Adeola. He told them how she had protected Oda. He told them about the war. He told them about her courage. He told them how the king and elders had betrayed her because they were afraid of her strength. The villagers listened in silence. Many people cried.
some mothers looked at their children. They realized that the suffering of their village had begun with the wrong actions of people who had lived many generations before them. Chief Adekunle lowered his head. "We cannot change the past," the chief priest nodded, "but we can refuse to repeat it." From that day, Oda changed. The people stopped calling Adeola only a monster. They remembered her as a warrior, a protector, a woman who had once loved her village. A monument was built in her honor beneath the ancient Iroko tree. Every 4 years, the villagers gathered there. But this time, they did not hide. They did not lock their doors. They did not wait for a sacrifice. Instead, they told the children the truth. The elders would say, "Never betray the person who sacrifices for you." They would say, "Never allow fear of another person's strength to turn your heart against them." And they would always end with one final lesson: never allow an old wrong to create a new generation of suffering. Thanks guys for watching this video. Please subscribe to this channel to watch more of our amazing stories. Like, share, and drop your comment below.